Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is HANDCUFF, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my hidden gems of Week 11 for the 2019 fantasy football season. Yes, we're all still recovering from the snap that occurred last night on Thursday Night Football and looking to fill in pieces to our incomplete fantasy football lineups. Unfortunately, the snap knocked out 4 teams and sent them to the bye, and not only that, knocked out multiple fantasy studs in the Thursday night matchup and across the fantasy football landscape going into Week 11. The only way to reclaim our fantasy studs is by using the fantasy realm to gather hidden gems to bring back our championship lineups. This time around, we're going after players scattered across time, but not only those that are going to help in Week 11, but help for the rest of the 2019 fantasy football season. We know where they play, we know their skill, we know our mission, whatever it takes. Hey everybody, how's it going? All right, hope everyone's doing well. Yes, we've brought back Hidden Gems, the series on this channel. I haven't, talked about Hidden Gems for quite some time, but, maybe I gotta bust out the Fantasy Gauntlet. Yes, I've assembled the Fantasy Gauntlet here, and we're gonna be talking about the Hidden Gems for this week. A lot of them having to do with either players this week that I believe have to be picked up and still have very little ownage throughout fantasy football leagues. I think under 50% on all of the 3 that I'm going to talk about. And then I'm also going to be talking about a couple different things that you need to address in order to make sure that you win a fantasy championship this year. Yes, you can compete and knock everybody out for 13 straight weeks, but if you cannot do the right things and prep for weeks 14, 15, and 16, there is a possibility that you could lose a fantasy championship because you didn't go ahead and take precautionary measures. Now, speaking of precautionary measures, let's talk about my first hidden gem of the week, the Mind Stone. When we think about the Mind Stone, right, we have to be cursed with knowledge, and we have to think about what is something that we need to preemptively begin to prepare for, and that right away is handcuffs. Now, who's on screen? If you know who this is, then you're pretty familiar with fantasy football, but this is Reggie Bonifant. This is Christian McCaffrey's handcuff. Now, when I talk about handcuff, what does that exactly mean? This is the player that is immediate backup. If anything was to happen to Christian McCaffrey, suspension, injury, anything, not trade obviously, but if anything of that nature was to occur, Reggie Bonifant would be the starting running back of the Carolina Panthers rest of season, and that would increase his value so drastically. And obviously, if you are someone who owns Christian McCaffrey or are reaping the rewards of his incredible performances this season, you need to go ahead now and lock these players down, because once we get to the fantasy football playoffs and players perhaps get injured, especially top echelon running backs, blue chip players, if they go down with an injury, this is an extremely important thing. If they go down with an injury, you need to be able to absorb the value. If Christian McCaffrey is knocked out of your lineup, that is instantly a 27, half PPR point reduction in your team's output every single week. That's on average. That's what it's going to be. If you at least have Reggie Bonifant in your lineup or on your bench ready to be put in, at least you have some sort of a way of supplementing the damage that your team is going to take. At least you will be prepared for the situation. Worst case scenario, we are buying insurance policies when we go out and we grab handcuff running backs off of the waiver wire. Now, let's talk about handcuff running backs, right? Reggie Bonifant is for Christian McCaffrey. Tony Pollard is for Ezekiel Elliott. Alexander Madison is for Dalvin Cook. Bilal Powell goes for Le'Veon Bell. Rashad Penny for Chris Carson. Latavius Murray, obviously, we saw what he was able to do for Alvin Kamara when he missed those 2 weeks. He had 30-plus point fantasy performances. Who else? Jalen Richard for a guy like Josh Jacobs, who's already questionable this week. Jalen Samuels for James Conner. We just saw it last night. Jalen Samuels had himself a 13-point half PPR fantasy week on an okay performance from that offense, really not okay. And he was still able to produce as a handcuff. There are so many handcuffs out there that have come in and made big plays. We saw Chase Edmonds earlier this year. There are a lot of guys that, yes, they are not as talented as the starting running back, but can come in and in good matchups be very, very productive. Now, you may be thinking, I have Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams is already owned. I don't have his handcuff. It happens. Your trade deadline's already gone. Those are situations you cannot prep for. But I'm talking about guys that are barely owned in like 8 to 5% of leagues. Tony Pollard is not owned in very many leagues for a reason, because a lot of people aren't expecting Zeke to go down with an injury. But if it's this, this is the season, and God forbid something happens, you need to be prepared, because if you don't have the number one waiver pickup, you end up losing a top echelon back that is going to help you win a championship, but instead, you're left to pretty much struggle. Also, a story from just last season, right? 2018, Todd Gurley missed the last 2 games of the regular season. Yeah, weeks 16 and 17 of the NFL season last year. And the issue was that a lot of people weren't prepared for him to miss those games. After the Eagles game, he still, put up a lot of points, had a knee injury, but a lot of people didn't prepare for it. A lot of people didn't go out and pick up C.J. Anderson. But if you did, and you played him in the fantasy championship week 16, by all means, he probably helped you win with a 20-plus point performance. You need to lock down handcuffs. Speaking of handcuffs, like for Todd Gurley, Darrell Henderson, if the Rams season goes awry and they are not winning games, which I don't expect them to as they look right now, there's a potential they might bring in Darrell Henderson or Malcolm Brown and start, and just hold off Gurley and say, you know what, you're done. We're packing you up. We've seen earlier this week, we saw David Montgomery go down with an injury. If Tariq Cohen is available in your league, because they just cut Mike Davis last week, Tariq Cohen needs to be on your roster if you are a David Montgomery owner and he's somehow available. Earlier today, Darren Sproles out for the season-ending injury. He is done. But Jordan Howard has a stinger now. He has a stinger injury. And what does that mean? Miles Sanders, if he is somehow available, you need to pick him up. Do you understand what I'm saying? Handcuffs are extremely valuable, and this is why they're the Mind Stone. Let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about the next hidden gem on the week. Let's talk about the Power Stone. Now, this is for an individual player. This is for Derrius Guice. Derrius Guice is coming back from injury. And yes, some people may say Derrius Guice is made out of glass. This guy has been injured his entire career, but somehow all these running backs at LSU continue to come out and be injured, him and Leonard Fournette. But Derrius Guice, he's definitely been through the ringer. It's unfortunate that his career has kind of started off this way, but I don't think this is going to define his career. As of right now, Derrius Guice is only owned in 45% of Yahoo Fantasy Leagues. And in the last 4 weeks, since the coaching change of Gruden being fired from the Washington Redskins, Adrian Peterson has been heavily fed the ball. In fact, he's been fed 25 times total in touches, 20 times, 16 times, and 19 times in just the past 4 games since the coaching change. Now, what does that lead me to believe? Derrius Guice is a part of this new wave of youth for the Washington Redskins. You have Dwayne Haskins starting for the rest of the season. You have Terry McLaurin, who they want to use a lot and move around the formation in order to get him the ball more. And then you have Derrius Guice. You have your 3 main pieces all within their first or second year that are going to be the future of this organization. And when I look at the upcoming schedule for a Washington Redskins offense, it looks promising. It looks like they can produce something of the sort to at least give Derrius Guice a boost. Now, I understand. Many of you may be thinking, Andrew, Derrius Guice is probably going to be, splitting snap with Adrian Peterson early. That's perfectly fine. But I do believe eventually it will be Derrius Guice's job to take and to run with. They're going to give it to him. Adrian Peterson is not helping this team make the playoffs. That's far gone. They need to build for the future, and I think Derrius Guice will be given the starting job and majority of the carries in the coming weeks. And in the coming weeks, what do we have? We have the Jets matchup this week where Derrius Guice needs to take the job. He needs to earn it this week. He needs to prove why he is powerful, the Power Stone. He needs to dominate the line of scrimmage and really make some big plays this week, because in the coming weeks, you play against the Detroit Lions, the second worst defense. They give up the second most points to opposing running backs in half-point PPR. Then the following week, you play against the Carolina Panthers. They give up the third most points to opposing running backs in half PPR. And then the following week after that, you play against the Green Bay Packers. They give up the 6th most points to opposing running backs. Then you get a tough matchup. And in week 16 of the Fantasy Football Playoffs, you play against the New York Giants, giving up the 14th most points to opposing running backs. And we've seen a lot of opposing running backs murk that defense, certainly. We saw Chase Edmonds do it. We saw Le'Veon Bell barely do it last week, but still score 15 points. There is a very good schedule ahead of this Washington Redskins team. And Derrius Guice, I truly do believe, needs to be picked up and owned. This is a hidden gem for the rest of the season. And I think this is a guy that can help you, especially if you are lacking in depth of the running back position, certainly. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about the reality stone. Now, as you all know, the reality stone has to do with the reality of the situation. And as of right now, the reality of the situation for the San Francisco 49ers revolves around the injuries that have taken place to this offense. Sure, earlier on in the season, Joe Staley was out, Kyle Juszczyk was out, but as of late, Emmanuel Sanders gone down with a rib injury. If you guys don't remember, Emmanuel Sanders has missed the last 2 end of the seasons due to ankle injuries. This is an older wide receiver, and it is going to take him a little while to come back. He's going to miss some time. George Kittle's been dealing with a knee injury. Matt Breida's been dealing with an ankle injury, all likely to be out potentially this coming week, and perhaps going into the future of this season. Now, why do I present Deebo Samuel to you? Well, Deebo Samuel, for some reason, is only owned in 46% of leagues. How? I have no clue. Deebo Samuel, in majority of my leagues, has been owned since like week 4, or maybe even drafted. Deebo Samuel is the number 2 wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers as of right now. In the last 2 weeks, 7 targets, 4 receptions, 40 yards, dropped a touchdown in that game against the Arizona Cardinals. This past week, with Emmanuel Sanders going down against the Seattle Seahawks defense, 11 targets, 8 receptions, 112 receiving yards. This is a wide receiver that is being granted the opportunity to run away with the number 1 wide receiver job. Obviously, Emmanuel Sanders will return, but you're going into a matchup that is extremely favorable. Just talking about this offense throws the ball nearly 30 times a game. That's not amazing. That's not a great amount. But in the last couple of weeks, we've seen 35 to 40 attempts from this offense because they are getting into shootouts. The Cardinals got them up to the wire, and the Seattle Seahawks beat this team in overtime. So what does that lead me to believe? There might not be a 100% San Francisco 49ers offense coming out and producing on every single drive like I normally do because of how many injuries they are faced with. That might lead to a closer matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. That might lead to a great amount of targets going in the direction of Deebo Samuel instead of having to run the ball out with Tevin Coleman, Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson for the entirety of the game. Okay. Also, if we look at what the Arizona Cardinals do on defense, they give up the 9th most points to opposing wide receivers. They give up the most points to opposing tight ends and the most points to opposing quarterbacks, or the second most points to opposing quarterbacks. That is unbelievable. That is a lot of points. This is a defense that has been getting torched all season long, and it's not slowing down. Sure, on the ground, they don't give up much, but through the air, they are very susceptible to a couple big plays. And just in the last 6 weeks, they've given up a lot of plays. In 4 out of the last 6 weeks, defensively, they have given up a 100-yard receiving wide receiver. In the last 4 of the last 6 weeks. In 6 of the last 6 weeks, we have at least seen one 80-plus yard receiver on the opposing team. There is a great opportunity for Deebo Samuel to run away with a wide receiver 2 opportunity here with a pretty big upside for the coming games. And I think Deebo Samuel, with only 46% ownage in Yahoo leagues, needs to be picked up immediately. Go ahead and get that done. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about time. Let's talk about Sanctum Sanctorum. And, this was the funniest thing because, as we all know in, Avengers Endgame, Hulk, Bruce Banner, goes to Sanctum Sanctorum when they go back in, spoilers, 2012. But it's kind of funny because, Fletcher Cox over here looks like the Hulk, right? And everything's green, but beautiful, okay? You know what? I try, guys. I try. Trust me. All right, so let's talk about the Eagles. And let's talk about the Eagles' defense. And why are they the time stone? Well, time is extremely valuable for the Eagles because in the coming weeks, they're going to be trying to really make a playoff push. As of right now, they have a 5-4 record, tied technically in terms of record with the Dallas Cowboys, but the Dallas Cowboys have the advantage in the divisional matchup. They are 1-0 over the Eagles this year. But what is coming down the pike? As of right now, the schedule for the Philadelphia Eagles from weeks 13 through 16 for the 2019 fantasy football season is extremely favorable, and I really do think if you're looking to pick up a defense for your fantasy football playoffs, it is the Eagles defense, because we know when this team gets down to the wire, they can clamp up defensively. Their front seven is certainly a brick wall, and their secondary can make plays. Sure, they're at times very weak in the secondary and can get punished, but their upcoming schedule of games does not really have me concerned about that secondary. Talking about it, week 13, they play against the Dolphins. Then the following week, in the first round of the fantasy football playoffs, week 14, they play against the Giants. A rookie quarterback, they can certainly take advantage of him. The following week, they play against another rookie quarterback, Dwayne Haskins of the Washington Redskins. And then in week 16, they play against the Dallas Cowboys for pretty much who is going to be the NFC East winner. This is a really good schedule, in my opinion. These are 4 good games that I think the Eagles defense can certainly produce for you, because I know for a fact there's no way that the San Francisco, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Baltimore Ravens defenses are available in your leagues. There's no way. That is not a possibility. Sure, you could try to stream a defense in one of those weeks, but I really do believe, as of right now, the Philadelphia Eagles defense seems to have the easiest matchup going into the fantasy football playoffs. And really, as potential playoff contenders, this team could be in line for some pretty big performances from their defense. A guy like Fletcher Cox right here to the right of me could produce. Anyway, just wanted to mention that. They are definitely the time stone, because in time, they're going to have some monster performances. And we've seen this defense really clamp up this year, have some pretty big performances already. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about the Space Stone here, going over to Camp Lehigh. All right, so here's the thing. Jacob Hollister, similar to a Derrius Guice or a Deebo Samuel, is somehow only owned in, so the other guys were like 40-some-odd%. Jacob Hollister's only owned in 26% of fantasy leagues on Yahoo right now. That is incredible. That is criminally low. Why? Because Jacob Hollister, as of right now, is the starting and only tight end for the Seattle Seahawks. Now, just saying those words might not resonate anything with you, but I truly do believe, and it is statistically proven, that the tight end position for the Seattle Seahawks has an immense amount of value. And we've already seen it thus far this season because of what Jacob Hollister, guys like Will Disley, have done within this offense. Now, again, 26% ownage, criminally low. This guy's put up 216-plus point fantasy weeks in the last 2 weeks alone. Now, when we go back and we look at those 2 weeks, Jacob Hollister, 80% snap share, 78% snap share. And not only that, Luke Wilson, the other tight end, just went down with a hamstring injury against the 49ers. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, this is the only tight end. Maybe Ed Dixon wants to come off the IR and play. But Ed Dixon's not taking a job from a guy like Hollister, who is consistently producing in the last couple of weeks. Now, yeah, in the time between Will Disley going down with his season-ending injury and finally finding Jacob Hollister in the last 2 weeks, there were some times where, the Seattle Seahawks tight end position, it wasn't utilized. But even then, the production of this position has been incredible. Just reading it from weeks 1 through 10, how many fantasy points and half-point PPR the tight end position alone for the Seattle Seahawks has put up on a weekly basis. Starting off from week 1 to week 10, 4.3, 21.3, 16.6, 18.8, 12.3, 12.3, right? The following week is when Will Disley goes out. 2.6, 3.5, 4. There's a 3-week slate in which they are lost and they cannot find a tight end. And then in the last 2 weeks, Tampa Bay and against the 49ers, 20.7, 16.2. All totaling for 120.3 fantasy points from just the tight end position alone from the Seahawks. That means on average per game this season, the tight end position for the Seattle Seahawks has scored on average in half PPR 12.03 fantasy points per game. You cannot tell me that Jacob Hollister should not be owned. They are going on a bye week, they are returning, and they are making a run for the playoffs and potentially a Super Bowl, because that is what they are looking for. With the MVP quarterback candidate they have, he pretty much is the MVP at this point. Jacob Hollister has so much more value. So much more value. On top of it, when we look at how much this team utilizes the tight end position, Russell Wilson already this season, from the amount of attempts that he has made, the 400 passing attempts he's made, 20% of his passing attempts have gone towards the tight end position already this season. That is a great already niche of targets that are going in the right direction. And then also Luke Wilson's injury could hold him out for a good amount of time. I think the sky's the limit for a guy like Jacob Hollister. And that's why he's this week's Space Stone, because he needs to be picked up, especially for those of you who are Austin Hooper owners and are going to be missing that guy for a couple weeks. And for those of you maybe dealing with some, if you're a Travis Kelce owner, he has got a bye week next week. Pick up a guy like this. He will pay dividends throughout the rest of the season. I promise you that. Let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about the last hidden gem for this week. Starting off with, whoa. What is this? Wait, hold up. Production crew, hold up, whoa. The Browns assault? No, hold up. Okay, hold up. No. That's not what I meant. No. I meant the Browns offensive assault. Okay, we're all clear. I meant the Browns offensive assault. Okay, we're good. This is what I'm talking about, okay? As of right now, the Browns are coming off a Thursday night win against a divisional matchup. That makes them 3-0 in their division alone. This is a team that could potentially make a run. Now, I know what you may be thinking. Goodness gracious, Andrew. Give up on Baker Mayfield. He's done. He's washed. I can't. I can't do it. I cannot do it. And I believe this week, the suspension, the indefinite suspension, I don't know what comes down on Myles Garrett's head. Maybe it's a helmet. Maybe it's a suspension. I don't know what it's going to be. But as of right now, Myles Garrett is a sacrifice. The sacrifice of Myles Garrett probably being suspended for the rest of the year is what gives this Browns offense the soul stone of the week going into the rest of the season. I truly do believe an incident like this is going to rally this team, and they're going to produce in the next 5 weeks. Looking at their schedule going forward, Miami, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Arizona, Baltimore. They have beaten Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and Baltimore already. Miami and Arizona should not be a problem. We'll get Kyler versus Baker. That is a fun matchup to see in the fantasy football playoffs. But looking at how many points these defenses give to opposing quarterbacks, Miami, 7th most, Cincinnati, 5th most, Arizona, 2nd most, these are defenses that aren't great. This is an offense that is producing better and better. We just had Nick Chubb surpass 1,000 rushing yards already this season. We are seeing something at least churn. We are seeing 2 back-to-back wins for this organization against decently good teams. Both teams had 5+ wins. They beat a 6-win Buffalo Bills team, and then they just beat a 5-win Pittsburgh Steelers team that could have potentially made the playoffs. But, they're looking like a mess right now with all of that, the quarterback play. As of right now, just looking at their offense as a whole, not just Baker, but their offense as a whole, because I know Baker's not even owned in like 50% of leagues right now. Looking at their offense as a whole, even with the comeback of Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb in the last 2 weeks, 20 rushing attempts, 27 rushing attempts last night. Kareem Hunt in the last 2 weeks, 9 targets, 7 receptions, 44 yards, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 46 yards. He's a flex option every single week now because of the amount of targets he's getting in the passing game. Jarvis Landry, he scored 3 back-to-back touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. And Odell Beckham is Odell Beckham. He could get the job done. And in the upcoming matchups, Miami, Pittsburgh should have had that touchdown in the first quarter. Cincinnati's an easy matchup. Arizona, I'm telling you, he will dice up another LSU alum, Patrick Peterson. And then he'll take on Baltimore in week 16. We'll see how that goes. But we've seen some matchups between the Browns and Baltimore Ravens where it's been shootouts before. Go back to last season, week 17. We've seen it. All I'm saying right now is that the Browns offense can make a run. They have the pieces and they have the ability to do so. And they are the soul stone for this week for me. I think the sacrifice of Myles Garrett and his rest of season and probably his paychecks coming forward is going to lead to something for this Browns team. I truly do believe it. I cannot see this team squandering this opportunity. But you know what? If they do, so be it. They've squandered it already this year. I'm willing to take the risk. I'm risking it for the biscuit, quote unquote. I want to thank everybody for watching. Again, the Hidden Gem series went away for a couple weeks, but again, I need some inspiration sometimes. And last night's debacle of James Conner, Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, the fight at the end of the game after a boring game in general, gave me inspiration, and hopefully this helps you guys out. This is the Fantasy Gauntlet. I want to thank everybody for watching again, and until next time, we'll be talking about probably Sunday morning, 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'll be doing our live stream with up-to-date rankings, all that jazz. We'll take care of that. But until then, I want to thank everybody for watching again. If you like today's video, click the like button. If you Haven't yet already, subscribe to the channel. Patreon link is down in the description for those of you looking to get all of your 2019 fantasy football questions answered. And until next time, thank you again, and I'll see you guys. Peace. I messed up there.